Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Captain Michael Miller. I'm the Public Information Officer for the City of Akron Police Department. Today, we have a few updates to share on the investigation into Sunday's shooting. We will be sharing some information about the victims involved, the steps we've taken during the investigation, and some upcoming community gatherings that the city and the community are working together on to help support the residents. Today, you'll be hearing from Akron Mayor Shamus Malik and Akron Police Chief Brian Harding. We will have time for questions at the end. I ask that you please limit your initial question to one question at a time to give everyone an opportunity to get their questions in. I'm going to move from my right to the left, one question, and then we'll have time to ask follow-up questions at the end. Please understand that some questions you may have, we may not be able to answer based on the integrity and sensitivity of the investigation, but we'll do our very best. At this time, I'd like to welcome Chief Harding for an update on the investigation.
Thank you, Captain Miller. The first thing I'd like to announce is that the number of individuals injured during the shooting has increased to 27. The scene of the shooting and later at our area hospitals was constantly evolving. As the event unfolded, at least one patient self-transported to one hospital first and then left and went to a second hospital. Additionally, one patient with minor injuries left the hospital as the staff triaged the most critical patients first and then later returned to be treated. Our hospitals are rightfully very protective of patient information, and so these fluctuations made it difficult to determine the exact number of victims of this incident initially. But we can now confirm that there are 27 individuals that were struck or grazed by gunfire during this incident. The medical examining officer has confirmed the identity of the one fatality in this incident, a 27-year-old Latarius Cook. I'd like to express my deepest condolences to the family of Mr. Cook on their loss. Two patients, a 29-year-old male and a 37-year-old male, remain in critical condition today. The other 25 victims are either in stable condition or have been treated and released. The youngest injured person was 19 years old. We have 3 people injured in their 20s. The vast majority were in their 30s, accounting for 21 of our injured individuals, and 2 individuals were in their 40s. My heart goes out to all those who are injured as they begin their journey to recovery. This event has impacted every single person in our community, and the recovery process is just beginning. Our detectives have been working tirelessly since the early morning hours of Sunday as they process all the evidence. In total, we have 45 shell casings that were recovered from the scene from at least 5 different weapons. 3 handguns were recovered at the scene, and we confirm at least 1 individual at the party did fire back at the initial shooter. We do not yet know whether one initial shooter or several, and we don't know how many individuals from the party returned fire at this point. The guns have all been processed for DNA, and that typically takes us about 30 days for us to get information back. The shell casings have been entered into NIBIN, which is the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, and we are also reviewing footage for any clues that may offer to help with the identity of those involved. I want to thank our community for their help as we have received a number of tips and calls. We're also following up on every lead. At this time, we do not have a vehicle or suspect information to share. We continue to ask the community and those present for any information that could help lead to the person or persons responsible for the tragedy. After the press conference on Sunday, the ATF offered an additional reward of $10,000 to anyone providing information that leads to the arrest of a suspect in this case. That's on top of the initial reward offered by the Summit County Crime Stoppers and the U.S. Marshals, which have collectively offered $12,500 for information leading to the arrest and successful prosecution of a suspect. That means the total reward money currently stands at $22,500. To encourage information and tips, you can call the Akron Police Department Detective Bureau at 330-375-2490, 330-375-2-TIP. Citizens may also provide anonymous information to any of the following: the Summit County Crime Stoppers by calling 330-434-COPS or texting TIPS CO with your tips to 274637. You can also download the Akron Police Department app and submit information on tip 411. The reward money will be funded through Crime Stoppers organization. Crime Stoppers is a private organization and as such are not subject to public records laws. They are not affiliated with any government organization, and they will not confirm the identity. They will confirm that your identity will remain confidential, and you can still receive reward money. On Monday, we released 911 calls we received regarding this incident, and we continue to process all the body cam footage of the incident, and we'll release that as soon as it's available. This is a fluid situation, and we are doing our best to share information as it becomes available. As officers first arrived to the party in a response to noise complaints, the body-worn camera footage shows officers engaged very positively, and people were complying with the request to clear the street. The owner of the party begins to control the party. We do not want to give the impression that officers shut the party down. But as we move forward, we will share the footage with the media and with the public to review. We continue to investigate until we have found the individual or individuals responsible for this shooting to ensure they are brought for justice. These victims and all who were present at the time of the shooting deserve some peace that can only come when a person is responsibly held for their actions. At this time, I'd like to invite Mayor Malik to the podium.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. I also want to, in particular, thank members of City Council for being here, including our Council President, Margot Somerville, our Council President Pro Tem, Brad McKittrick, our Ward 5 Councilman, Johnny Hanna, whose ward the shooting occurred within, and our Ward 1 Councilman, Sam DeShazier. I want to also offer my condolences to the family of Latarius Cook. I want to thank some of our local media outlets, Signal, the Beacon Journal, for their coverage of Latarius, who many of his friends and family called him LT. Following the news of the shooting, the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs reached out to us to offer support. We've had several meetings with their staff and their team over the last few days to discuss national and state resources that the City of Akron can access to deal with this tragedy. I want to thank President Biden and his team for their help. I also want to thank the many state and local officials that have reached out with their support as well. It really does mean a lot to me to see the partnership between local, state, and federal officials with regard to this tragedy. My prayers remain with all the victims, as well as everyone who's been impacted by this tragedy. As Chief Harding mentioned at the press conference on Sunday, every single person in our community should be able to gather with family and friends in a safe environment and feel safe and be safe. The trauma of last weekend's incident is impacting all of us in Akron. The mental health of our residents, our employees, and especially those who were at the party and those who live in the surrounding neighborhoods is absolutely critical in the days, weeks, and months ahead. To help assist with prioritizing mental health, this week the community has come together to host several events to support those impacted by the tragedy. Tonight from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., the Arlington Church of God is hosting a prayer vigil at their church, inside the church at 539 South Arlington Street. Tomorrow, Burning Bush Church is hosting Greater Akron Praise just down the street at 131 South High Street at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening to further support the community during this difficult time. Additionally, we have partnered with area faith leaders, mental health resource providers, and nonprofit organizations to help organize a community gathering space for folks to process and reflect on this tragedy. It's important now more than ever for us to come together and support one another. That event will be hosted at the East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation this Saturday, June 8th from 2 to 6 p.m. Their address is 550 South Arlington Street. I'd encourage anyone in need of support to come out and join us for this important gathering. We'll be sharing information about that event on city social media, and we'll ask folks to share that as well to help get the word out, again, particularly for those who may have been present or those in the immediate neighborhood or anyone who feels really impacted by the trauma of this shooting. I want to take a second and reflect on the Kelly Avenue neighborhood that's dealing with this tragedy. Earlier this week, someone made a comment to me that I more than understand. They said that, their concern was that we would be focused on making an arrest and wiping our hands and moving on. We are not going to do that. We are here with the community. This is an incredibly challenging thing for any community to deal with. And our city government and our whole community has to wrap our arms in compassion and love and support around this neighborhood. The folks who live in this neighborhood will be processing this trauma for weeks, months, and likely years to come. And they deserve a city government that doesn't just move along to the next thing. So and I think all of us, are committed to engaging with and investing in our neighborhoods and working hand in hand with folks in our neighborhoods as we strive to ensure safety and ensure prosperity in all parts of Akron. I'll now turn it back over to Captain Miller for the Q&A.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to open it up to questions at this time. We're going to start this time on my right. I ask again to just ask one question. We'll move from right to left, giving everybody an opportunity to ask at least the first initial question. Then we'll open it back up for any supplement questions you may have at that time. If you could also indicate who your question is designed for or intended for, that'll help us move through that process. Bob.
Just to be efficient, I'm going to ask my question, Joe's question too, because he's busy behind the camera, so I do have two, but we'll do it once. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, for the chief, can you talk about the use of flock cameras? Can you use them at all without a description of the car? Have you been utilizing them in any way, shape, or form to try to identify a vehicle at the scene?
Absolutely, we are using flock cameras. We can use them consistently in investigations we have in this one as well.
Can you elaborate on what you're doing? Or what you're
Yeah, so we can run vehicles that hit in certain areas. If we do have any proposed descriptions, we can also put those in as well and see if there's any information on that.
Any luck?
Nothing we're willing to share at this point,
Okay.
no.
And then secondly, I guess would be more for the mayor. You sort of touched on this, but having been in that neighborhood the past couple of days, there's a lot of concern over their own safety for
Yep.
themselves, for their kids.
Yeah.
We're not getting daily updates. We're being declined interviews. Sometimes they feel like they are being left behind, that they're not getting the answers. Can you speak to how you would want to respond to them when they're not able to get, updates or things daily?
Sure, we're trying to get information as quickly as we possibly can. This is a fluid situation, and we want to make sure that we're coming out and sharing accurate information. We've been in touch with a lot of folks in the community, really leaning on our Ward 5 councilman, leaning on some of the faith leaders in the neighborhood. I've been out there in the neighborhood speaking to folks, and so it is a crisis situation, and we are trying to respond as best as we can in a fluid situation. We are going to continue to share information. What we don't want to do is say, well, we'll talk about this to News 5, and we'll talk about this to the Beacon, and we'll talk about this to Signal. We want to have this space in which we can share all the information directly with the community and address the questions that you're raising. We're happy to take as many questions as you have here today, and this is not, I think, likely going to be the last press conference. We also are committed to sharing out information on social media, so we've been trying to do that as well, and we'll continue to do that. We understand the concerns about safety, right? And so we've been talking about the birthday party that this occurred at, and thinking about how we look at, as across the rest of the summer, there are going to be many festivals, events at which there are large gatherings, and how we want to make sure to work with neighborhood leaders to make sure that we are providing safety as much as we possibly can. And so this is a fluid situation, again, something like 96 hours into the situation. We remain committed to sharing information as we can in a timely way, but we also want to be accurate. And so you saw we had to come back here and shift back around the number because the number is fluid. We had to make the clarification around the initial outreach. We're doing our best to share just with you what we can absolutely verify and not speculate or not go down rabbit holes.
Yes, sir.
Following up on what he said, and I brought it up on Sunday with the new Ring camera program, are you finding people right now, are they more willing to give you that information in those videos, or are you having to use the actual contract and negotiation deal, which is where you have to like ask for it and request it directly?
I don't think, I can let Chief Harding speak to this, but I don't think we're in a position where we're forcing anyone or that we're, we really are interacting directly with the residents, canvassing the neighborhood and speaking directly to them on that. And certainly part of that is asking whether they have any footage. Do you want to comment on that?
But he's correct. We haven't had a demand from anybody, but we've so far been just going out and getting some cooperation.
Yes, ma'am.
For the chief, do you guys have, I know there's still a lot of questions, still not a lot you can share, but do you have any reason to believe this is a targeted attack?
I think it's too early in the investigation to know exactly what the motive is, and I don't want to get in here and start speculating and then have to maybe change that later. So I wish I could share that, but I don't have a strong answer for you there.
Anyone else on this side before we slide over? Derek?
Chief Harding, can you elaborate a little bit on how the city will be offering increased security for city events over the summer, specifically the upcoming Juneteenth celebration in Ward 5 on June 15th?
I think the mayor addressed it a little bit earlier. We continue to work with our partners, and we'll continue to do that to try to work to make sure people are safe. Everyone in every area deserves to feel safe. We take that very seriously. With the resources we have, we're going to continue to do that. We're doing additional patrols in areas as well. We'll continue to do that.
I can elaborate on that too. Talking about our approach to the summer, something that, predated this past weekend, certainly, we want to make sure we have adequate staffing to be able to do a lot of this proactive work. But we also want to work to ensure that we're aware of events. So certainly, you and I are aware of the festivals or the events that are, that people have spent almost a year organizing. We might be less familiar with an event like a birthday party or something else that just is more, folks got together on a Wednesday and planned something for a Sunday. And so we do want to work on approaching those events and working with folks in the community to know where there might be a large gathering, so then we can be proactive about addressing that.
Stephanie?
So in the last press conference, you mentioned concern over retaliation, and I'm wondering what specifically the city and other agencies are doing to address that issue.
Yeah, what we are focused on is locating the person who committed this awful act and holding them accountable. And I think that's the best way to address that. And so, that is our focus. That's why we are encouraging folks to speak with police and come forward and share any information that they can, even a small detail, because holding someone accountable is the biggest way that we can address that.
Right.
Is there at all going to be a point where you're going to release the names of the injured people to the press, not for publication, but for our own reference and continuing reporting on this?
I don't see that in the immediate future, no. I think we'd like to respect their privacy initially as well. I'm not saying maybe at some point that doesn't happen, but we haven't talked about that immediately.
Yes, sir.
At any point during the city's response to the shooting, was there discussion of the mayor's office exercising its authority to enact a curfew?
No, we did not discuss enacting a curfew. We didn't feel at the time it was needed for this incident.
Dave?
Chief, just from your experience, there are more than 100 people, to our knowledge, there gathered at the party, most of them outdoors. How incredible is it that somebody in that group didn't actually get, I know you don't have a description of the car, but that somebody in that group wouldn't have seen something to be able to give you a description?
So we have received a number of leads, but I also don't want to come here and give you information that not to be true. So each of those additional leads we have to run down. So we have been getting some support. I think we have been getting some information and leads, but those can be time consuming for us to work on as well. And I don't want to give up and give any descriptions if I can't confirm them, right? I don't want to give you one today and have it be wrong later.
If I can add, we do also just want to note that, folks who were there present at the party, they're dealing with somebody opening fire on them. People hit the ground. People are in the middle of a chaotic situation. We have to understand and respect that piece as well. So, we're really thankful that folks are coming forward and sharing information, and we have been encouraging that since the start of this. But we also we don't want to imply that, folks who were there were doing anything wrong or that kind of thing.
It's not the implication. It's just, it was a question that one person out of a crowd of more than 100. What are the odds? What are the chances that nobody was able to give you a description of the car?
Like I mentioned, we've received some descriptions. Some of them can be a little different, and we want to make sure that we're given the right information. So, but to the mayor's point also, some people were mad, turned that way, they heard that and went the other way and would not have seen it. So that number would naturally be smaller that maybe weren't paying attention to that.
Following up on Dave's question, there, the 911 call that mentioned a red Charger. Any follow-up or?
Yeah, we followed up with that vehicle. We have a couple other vehicle descriptions we followed up with as well. So, but again, I don't want to jeopardize where we may have information on each of those as well. But all of those we followed up on. We've also received other information we followed up on as well.
Yes, sir. I'm wondering if the department could have done anything different responding to the scene at the first time, whether that's being present, remaining to be present on the scene, or anything else. I know it's easy to come after an event's happened saying something could have been done differently when you're not expecting a mass shooting, but I'm wondering if anything could have been done differently, anything might be done in the future differently.
I think that gets into this fluid situation, right? And so as we go forward, we're trying to be as open as possible about the response and our understanding of the response at the time. As we review the BWC and are able to release it, we want to have a conversation about how our community addresses events like this. But it's difficult to sit here before we have all the information and all the facts and make those judgments. But certainly, these are difficult situations to engage with. So I think we want to share the information that we have. There's significant BWC from before the incident. Between the 10 and 11 o'clock hour, and then there's I think something like 70 hours of footage from the situation after the shooting began, and so that isn't a significant amount to go through. And so I don't want to start speculating about what went right or what didn't. But certainly as we go forward, this whole conversation will be more nuanced and more nuanced. Do you want to add?
No, I think the mayor hit it. There's a lot to go through there, and there was really a heroic response by a lot of people, both with the police department, the officers, detectives responded, as well as the other first responders from the fire department as well.
Anybody?
I guess the first day when you had the press conference, it didn't feel like you guys had any idea who did this, and several days have passed. For the public, do you feel any closer that you're going to be able to identify this person anytime soon?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we are, like I mentioned, we are getting information. However, each of those can be extremely time consuming to run those down, and I don't want to come up here and start sharing things that I can't verify and say are true. That wouldn't be fair. And I also want to make sure that we protect the investigation and the integrity of it as well.
If I can add, the team here is working on this investigation around the clock. They're working with federal partners and state partners. I'm really confident that we can't, promise you an outcome or promise you a specific time, but we are working on this with every resource that we have, and we're meeting regularly, several times a day about this, and so we are focused on holding someone accountable here.
Any message you have to anyone who might have information but they might be hesitant to share because they're scared or they're not sure what might happen?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we've received several tips, and that's why we tried to share different ways that people can confidentially do that. We'll take the information any way we can get it, whether it's any of the ways we shared, whether it's a trusted community partner that someone feels comfortable reaching out to. We're just in need of the information. The more information we get will help us build a better case. And ultimately, like the mayor said, this is our number one priority. As an organization, this is what we are completely focused on today. This is by far our number one priority as an agency. We have a team of investigators that are working on this day and night, and we're also, like the mayor mentioned, partnering with many people. So anyone that's willing to give information, we absolutely want that information, and we will run those leads down.
And if I can just follow up, we understand and appreciate the concerns about safety. We understand fear, but we also want to share what information we can about the confidentiality through Crime Stoppers. We understand that may not address all the concerns, but we feel strongly that can help maintain that confidentiality. Separately, if folks want to reach out and better understand how that process works, we'll happy to talk through that with folks. We're not. We want to invite people to come in and be open with us and speak with us. So we're not looking to come after folks. We are trying to get as much information as we can about this horrible thing that happened.
Anybody else? Stephanie?
So a couple of things that we heard that we wanted to check with you on. We heard that there was a 1-year-old possibly who was grazed by a bullet, and it doesn't sound like that's correct, but wanted to ask about that. And then also that people may have gone to hospitals outside of our area, like in Cleveland and Columbus, to seek treatment. And we were just wondering if there was...
I'm not aware of that being factual on either of those regards.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So at this point of your investigation, do you feel that all 27 people that were hit by the same singular person, or there might be more than one person?
I don't want to speculate on that. Like I mentioned, we believe that we found shell casings from at least 5 different bullets, weapons there. So we don't have the information back on who did that, but we know at least 5 weapons were used.
Yeah.
I'd like to follow up on that, Chief. With the NIBIN tests, are you able to say whether those have been fruitful?
We're starting to get into some initial information back, but we still have a lot to go through on that. So we sent all that stuff off right away the next day. So we started to get some additional information back, and we're following those leads as well.
Sir?
I just want to confirm, so the 27 people were people hit by bullets. They weren't people who got hurt running away or something like that.
That's correct. They were either hit or grazed.
And then is it possible, I don't know about crime scene investigation like you know about crime scene investigation, is it possible to identify the bullet from somebody who's been hit?
Depending on the condition it is when it's ultimately recovered. So we won't know that for every person. If somebody was grazed and there's nothing there, we wouldn't be able to determine where that came from. So we can determine where the shell casings are, and we'll process that as part of the crime scene, and then each of those shell casings we ultimately will process and enter NIBIN to try to determine where each of those were. So we do attempt to recreate that ultimately at the end of the investigation.
Yeah.
Can you tell me if the U.S. Marshals Task Force is involved in the investigation at all?
They have been assisting us. We've had many of our federal partners been assisting us as well.
Can you tell me what other federal partners you've had assisting?
Sure. The FBI, the ATF have both been there as well. We've also partnered with the Sheriff's Department throughout this as well.
U.S. Attorney's Office.
Oh, and the U.S. Attorney's Office also has been part of that with us.
Yes, sir.
Weapons that were recovered at the scene, has ownership been determined through serial numbers, or would they belong to anybody at the party or not, or if the serial numbers even exist?
Yeah, so we're going through that. We'll run those down, also do e-traces on each of those. That's routine practice for us. We also test fire them to see if they were part of that. So we are able to determine some of that information.
Any last question before we close? Anybody?
Okay.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Again, we'll provide updates as soon as we're able. At various stages of the investigation, this thing will still be an ongoing situation. So any questions that you have, feel free to forward those via email. We'll kind of compartmentalize that and then try to get you responses if appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.